The derelict floated in the asteroid field like a forgotten dream. The ship was massive, easily 2 kilometers long. Its hull covered in symbols no living species could read. It had drifted here for 10,000 years, according to the surveys. A relic from the predecessor civilization that had vanished before most modern species had discovered fire. Dr. Kessa stood on the observation deck of the research vessel Wandering Scholar, staring at the ancient ship through the viewport. Her scales shimmered blue with excitement. As a Solarian archaeologist, she had spent 30 years studying predecessor artifacts. This was the discovery of a lifetime. "Beautiful, isn't it?" she said to her team. Captain Vorn, a Krillian with 6 eyes and thick armor plating, clicked his mandibles nervously. "Beautiful and dangerous. That ship is dead, Doctor. Has been for millennia. We should catalog it from a distance and move on." "Dead?" Kessa's tail swished in disagreement. "Captain, this vessel is remarkably intact. The hull shows minimal damage. If we could access its systems, learn how it functioned—" "Its systems are beyond our understanding," interrupted Chief Engineer Raxlon. The tall Vorkan crossed all 4 arms over his chest. "I have been scanning that ship for 3 days. The technology is completely alien, different from anything in our databases. We cannot even identify the power source, assuming it has one." "Then we bring in specialists," Kessa insisted. "We brought specialists," Captain Vorn said. "You are looking at them. I have the top engineering team in the Galactic Survey Fleet. Raxlon has 40 years of experience with xenotech. If he says the ship is beyond us, I believe him." Kessa's scales dulled to a disappointed gray. She knew they were right. The predecessors had been impossibly advanced. Their ruins dotted hundreds of worlds, but almost nothing they left behind still functioned. The few working artifacts that had been found were studied for decades without anyone fully understanding them. "1 week," she pleaded. "Give me 1 week to document the exterior and—" "Dr. Kessa," the communications officer called out. "We are receiving a transmission. A civilian transport is requesting permission to approach." "Civilian?" Captain Vorn's eyes narrowed. "This is a restricted research zone. Who authorized them?" "They say they heard about the predecessor discovery on the public feeds," the officer explained. "The captain claims he has expertise in ancient technology and wants to offer assistance." Raxlon laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "Another treasure hunter. Tell them this is a military operation and send them away." "Wait," Kessa said. "What species is the captain?" The officer checked her console. The bridge fell silent. Humans were relatively new to the galactic community, having joined only 60 years ago. They were small, short-lived, and physically unremarkable. Most species considered them curious but insignificant. They had no unique biological advantages, like Vorkan strength or Solarian intelligence. They were just average. "A human wants to help repair a predecessor ship?" Raxlon said slowly. "That is like a child offering to rebuild a star." Let them approach," Kessa decided. "We lose nothing by listening." Captain Vorna considered, then nodded. "Permission granted, but I want security standing by." The transport was a battered cargo hauler that had seen better decades. It docked with the Wandering Scholar an hour later. The human who emerged was shorter than everyone on the bridge, standing perhaps 1.7 meters tall. He wore a stained jumpsuit with numerous pockets, all bulging with tools. His hair was dark and messy, and he carried a worn backpack that looked ready to fall apart. "Good morning," he said cheerfully in slightly accented Galactic Standard. "I am Marcus Webb. Thank you for letting me aboard." "Mr. Webb," Captain Vorn began formally, "we appreciate your interest, but this is a scientific mission. We cannot allow—" "Yeah, I know. I saw the notices," Marcus interrupted, pulling a datapad from one of his pockets. "But I think I can help. See, I have been working with predecessor tech for about 15 years now. Started as a hobby, became kind of an obsession. Raxlon stepped forward, his massive frame making the human look tiny by comparison. No offense to your species, but predecessor technology is beyond the understanding of the galaxy's greatest minds. What makes you think? I have the manual, Marcus said simply. Everyone stared at him. You have what? Kessa asked. Marcus patted his backpack. The manual. Well, part of it. Maybe 30% translated. I found it on a predecessor station near Earth's outer colonies. Been working on decoding it ever since. It is basically a maintenance guide for predecessor vessels. Raxalon's mandibles clicked in disbelief. That is impossible. Predecessor script has never been fully translated. Teams of linguists have worked for centuries. Oh, the written language is brutal, Marcus agreed. Took me 8 years just to figure out the basics. But once I cracked the numerical system, the technical documentation started making sense. Engineering specs are pretty universal. You know? A thruster is a thruster, no matter who built it. He pulled out his datapad and showed them the screen. It displayed predecessor symbols alongside human annotations and diagrams. Kessa leaned in, her scales brightening with excitement. The symbols matched known predecessor script, but the annotations showed connections she had never considered. This is remarkable, she breathed. If this is genuine, only one way to find out, Marcus said with a grin. He looked at the ancient ship through the viewport. That is a predecessor scout-class vessel, Model 7, if I am reading the hull markings correctly. Heavy exploration variant. Probably designed for long-duration missions in uncharted space. He squinted at the markings along the ship's hull. Yep, see those glyphs near the forward section? That is the designation for long-range sensor array. And those panels on the port side are emergency repair access points. The manual says they are supposed to glow blue when the ship has power, but I am not seeing that, so yeah, she is completely dead right now. Raxlon moved beside him, studying the same markings. I surveyed that section for 2 days and found nothing unusual. You identified specific systems in 10 seconds. Like I said, Marcus replied, I have been studying this stuff for a while. The predecessors were amazing engineers, but they were also practical. They built things to be maintained and repaired. You just need to know where to look. Captain Vorn studied the human carefully. Marcus Webb stood barely taller than the console beside him. Yet he spoke with absolute confidence about technology that had baffled the galaxy's best scientists for generations. Mr. Webb, the captain said slowly, if what you claim is true, this changes everything. But I must ask, why share this knowledge? A working predecessor manual would be worth billions of credits. Governments would pay fortunes for it. Marcus laughed and scratched his head. Yeah, my wife says the same thing. But honestly, I am not interested in selling it. I just love figuring out how things work. Ancient alien spacecraft? That is like the ultimate puzzle. Way more fun than credits sitting in an account. Dr. Kessa's scales rippled with amusement. Humans were strange creatures. Most species she knew would have sold such knowledge immediately or kept it secret for personal gain. This human simply wanted to solve puzzles. I like him, she announced. Captain, I recommend we allow Mr. Webb to examine the vessel. If he can truly read predecessor systems, his help would be invaluable to our research. Raxlon still looked doubtful. With all respect, Doctor, we are discussing a ship that has been inactive for 10 millennia. Even if Mr. Webb understands the theory, actually bringing it back to life is another matter entirely. Which is why I need to get aboard, Marcus said eagerly. He pulled out his datapad again and started scrolling through pages of notes. According to the manual, predecessor ships have redundant backup systems. The main reactor might be cold, but there should be auxiliary power cells that are basically immortal. They draw energy from quantum fluctuations in space itself. As long as the universe exists, They keep working. That is impossible, Raxlon stated flatly. You cannot draw meaningful energy from quantum fluctuations. The amount would be infinitesimal. For powering weapons or engines, sure, Marcus agreed. But for basic systems, emergency lighting, computer cores, life support monitors, the auxiliary cells can handle that indefinitely. The manual calls them the heartbeat systems. They never die. He looked back at the ancient ship. If I am right, that vessel still has power somewhere in its core. We just need to find the access point and wake up the sleeping systems. Then we work our way up to the main reactor. Captain Vorn exchanged glances with his senior officers. The humans' explanation sounded logical, but it contradicted everything they knew about predecessor technology. Still, Marcus had identified ship systems from external markings that their scans had missed. Perhaps there was truth to his claims. Very well, the captain decided. You may board the vessel with a security team and our chief engineer. But Mr. Webb, if anything goes wrong, I will be the first one running back to this ship, Marcus promised. I have a wife and 2 kids waiting for me at home. I am not taking stupid risks. 2 hours later, Marcus floated through the silent corridors of the predecessor ship. His magnetic boots clicked softly against the metal floor. Behind him, Raxlon and Dr. Kessa followed in their environmental suits. The ship's interior was dark except for their helmet lights, which created moving shadows on the walls. The corridor was enormous, clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. The ceiling stretched 5 meters overhead, and the doorways were wide enough to drive a small vehicle through. Strange symbols covered every surface, glowing faintly in the beam of their lights. This is incredible, Kessa whispered. Her voice crackled through the radio link. The preservation is remarkable. Everything looks like the crew just left yesterday. Marcus consulted his datapad as he walked, comparing the symbols on the walls to his translated manual. According to this, we need to reach the central spine of the ship. That is where the primary computer core is located. If the auxiliary power is still active, we should be able to access it from there. How much further? Raxlon asked. The massive engineer had to duck through doorways designed for species even larger than him. 300 meters ahead, then down 2 levels, Marcus replied. He stopped at an intersection and examined the wall markings. Yeah, this way. The manual uses color coding. Blue symbols mean engineering sections. Green is life support. Red is navigation. And control. They followed the blue symbols deeper into the ship. The silence was absolute, except for their breathing and the soft clink of magnetic boots. Kessa kept stopping to scan interesting artifacts and take holographic images. Every corridor revealed new wonders, control panels with unknown functions, storage compartments sealed for thousands of years, viewing ports that looked out into the asteroid field. Finally, they reached a massive circular chamber. In the center stood a pillar of dark metal covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift in their light. The pillar extended from floor to ceiling, easily 10 meters in diameter. There, Marcus said, pointing. That is the core column, the central nervous system of the entire ship. He approached the pillar and ran his gloved hand across its surface. The symbols seemed to follow his touch, creating patterns of light that faded quickly. Marcus pulled out a specialized tool from his backpack and pressed it against a specific section of the pillar. What are you doing? Raxlon asked nervously. Looking for the maintenance port, Marcus explained. The manual says every core column has an emergency access panel. It is designed so repair crews can interface with the ship, even during total power failure. Just need to find the right spot. And there was a soft click. A section of the pillar slid aside, revealing a small opening with a crystalline surface inside. The crystal pulsed with a faint, blue light. Found it, Marcus said triumphantly. The light grew stronger. It spread along the patterns on the pillar, like water flowing uphill, creating beautiful cascading designs. The chamber began to hum with a sound so deep they felt it through their boots rather than heard it. By the ancestors, Kessa breathed. You actually did it. The ship is responding. Panels around the chamber began to glow. Text appeared on surfaces that had been dark for 10,000 years. The symbols scrolled past in languages none of them could read, but Marcus grinned behind his helmet. She is running diagnostics, he explained. The core is checking all systems to see what works and what is broken. This is going to take a while. But we did it. We woke her up. Raxlon stared at the awakening ship in disbelief. How did you know exactly where to touch? Marcus held up his datapad. Page 47 of the manual. Section titled, Emergency Reactivation Procedures for Scout-Class Vessels. There is even a diagram showing the exact location of the maintenance port. The chamber continued to brighten as ancient systems came to life. Blue light traced patterns across the walls, like veins carrying energy through a sleeping giant. Marcus watched his datapad carefully, reading the predecessor symbols that scrolled across nearby panels. Okay, this is good, he muttered. Life support systems are checking out. Atmosphere recyclers are at 92% function. Not bad after 10,000 years. Life support? Raxlon stepped closer to examine the glowing panels. You mean this ship can still produce breathable air? Give it about 20 minutes, Marcus said, still reading. The system needs to purge the old atmosphere first and cycle in fresh mixture. The manual warns not to remove helmets until the air quality indicator shows green. Should be that panel over there. He pointed to a section of wall where symbols were changing colors, shifting from red through yellow. Dr. Kessa was recording everything with her scanner, her scales flickering with excitement. This is extraordinary. We are witnessing technology that was ancient when my species was still learning to make fire, and it works as if it were built yesterday. The predecessors were serious about quality control, Marcus replied with a grin. I have read maintenance logs in the manual from ships that operated for thousands of years without major repairs. They built things to last forever. The humming grew deeper, resonating through the floor. More sections of the ship began to wake up. Corridor lights activated in sequence, spreading outward from the central chamber like sunrise, pushing back night. Through the doorway, they could see emergency lighting illuminating the passages they had walked through in darkness. Incredible, Raxlon breathed. The ship is restoring itself automatically. Not quite, Marcus corrected. It is running on minimum power right now. Just the essential systems. To get engines and weapons online, we would need to restart the main reactor. That is a much bigger job. He tapped his datapad, scrolling through more sections of the manual. But we have navigation, communications, and basic sensors now. The ship can tell us where it has been, what it saw, maybe even why the crew abandoned it. Can you access the ship's logs? Kessa asked eagerly. Historical records from 10,000 years ago would revolutionize our understanding of predecessor civilization. Maybe, Marcus said. Depends on whether the data survived. But first, we should establish a proper interface. The core is awake, but we need to tell it we are friends, not threats. The predecessors had security protocols. If the ship decides we are intruders, it might lock us out. Or worse. Worse? Captain Vorn's voice crackled through their radio link from the research vessel. What do you mean worse? Mr. Webb? Well? Marcus hesitated. The manual mentions automated defense systems. Predecessor ships could defend themselves against boarding parties. We really do not want to trigger those. Silence on the radio for a moment. Then, Captain Vorn spoke very carefully. Mr. Webb, please tell me you knew this before you activated the ship. I did, Marcus assured him quickly. That is why I used the maintenance port. It tells the ship that authorized repair crew are aboard. We should be fine. Probably. Probably? Raxlon repeated. 99% sure, Marcus amended. Look, the manual is pretty clear about the protocols. As long as we do not try to access restricted areas or tamper with weapons systems, the ship will recognize us as maintenance personnel. It is actually very logical. A new sound echoed through the chamber, a melodic tone, rising and falling like a gentle song. All three of them froze. What is that? Kessa whispered. Marcus checked his datapad and smiled with relief. That is the all-clear signal. The ship has completed its basic diagnostics and accepted our presence. We are officially recognized as the current crew. The air quality indicator panel shifted to green. Marcus reached up and carefully removed his helmet. He took a cautious breath, then a deeper one. Air is good, he reported. A bit stale, but breathable. Temperature is comfortable. The life support systems work perfectly. Raxlon and Kessa removed their helmets as well. The air had an odd smell, like metal and electricity, but it was fresh and clean. This is amazing, Kessa said, turning in a slow circle to take in the glowing chamber. We are breathing air, produced by a machine that is thousands of years older than my entire civilization. Marcus walked to one of the active panels and placed his hand against it. Text appeared in response, flowing across the surface. He studied it intently, occasionally referencing his datapad. The ship is giving me a status report, he said. Let me see here. Hull integrity is excellent. No major damage detected. Energy reserves are low, but stable. Main reactor is offline but repairable. Engines are functional but need reactor power. Weapons systems are locked down. Navigation database is intact. He looked up with shining eyes. This ship is completely salvageable. With time and the right resources, we could get it fully operational again. That would be a historic achievement, Kessa said. A working predecessor vessel. The scientific value alone would be immeasurable. There is more. Marcus continued reading. The ship has voyage logs going back 12,000 years. Detailed records of planets explored, species encountered, scientific discoveries. It is all here, stored in the computer core. Raxlon shook his head in wonder. I have been an engineer for 40 years. I have worked on the most advanced ships in the galaxy. But this technology makes everything I know look primitive. How did the predecessors achieve this? That is the question, isn't it? Marcus said thoughtfully. They were not just advanced. They thought differently about engineering. Look at this ship. Every system has backups. Every component is designed for easy repair. They built for the long term, not just for immediate needs. He gestured around the chamber. Most modern ships are designed to last maybe 50 years before needing major overhauls. This ship has lasted 10,000 years and still works. That is not just better technology. That is better philosophy. The ship hummed its agreement, lights pulsing gently along the walls. Dr. Kessa approached another panel and touched it experimentally. It responded to her contact, displaying information she could not read. Mr. Webb, how long would it take to translate more of the manual? If we could understand these systems fully, imagine what we could learn. And, Webb, how long would it take to port? Webb, how long would it take to translate more of the manual? If we could understand, if we could learn, Webb, how long would it take to translate more of the manual? Years, Marcus admitted. Maybe decades. The predecessor language is complex, and technical documentation is especially dense. But I have been making steady progress. With help from linguists and access to more predecessor texts, we could speed things up. Captain Vorn materialized in the transport beam, arriving in the chamber with 2 security officers. He removed his helmet and stared at the glowing systems surrounding them. His 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a Krillian gesture of profound surprise. "Unbelievable," he said quietly. "I am standing inside an active predecessor ship. I never thought I would live to see this day. Unbelievable. I never thought I would live to see this day." Marcus was still working at the main panel, his fingers moving across the crystalline surface. "Captain, good timing. The ship just finished analyzing its own condition. I think you should hear this." He pulled up a display that showed a 3-dimensional image of the vessel. Sections glowed in different colors: green, yellow, and red. "Green means fully functional," Marcus explained. "Yellow means damaged but repairable. Red means critical failure. As you can see, most of the ship is green or yellow. Only a few red sections. Mostly in the engineering decks, where the main reactor is located." "What happened to the reactor?" Raxlon asked, moving closer to study the display. Marcus scrolled through more information. According to the logs, there was a malfunction about 10,000 years ago. Some kind of coolant leak in the primary containment system. The crew initiated an emergency shutdown to prevent a catastrophic failure. "They saved the ship by turning it off," Kessa said with understanding. "But why did they abandon it?" "They did not," Marcus said softly. His expression grew sad as he read the logs. "They stayed. All 47 crew members remained aboard, working to repair the reactor. But the coolant leak was worse than they thought. It contaminated several decks before they could seal it." The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. "The crew died trying to save their ship," Captain Vorn said with respect. "They were brave. They were brave." Marcus nodded. "The final log entry is from the chief engineer. She wrote that they had sealed the contaminated sections and put the ship into emergency preservation mode. She hoped that someday someone would find the vessel and bring it back to life." Dr. Kessa touched the panel gently, as if offering comfort to the long-dead crew. "Then we honor their sacrifice by completing their work." "Can the reactor be repaired, Mr. Webb?" Marcus studied the technical readouts carefully. "Maybe. The contamination has probably decayed by now. 10,000 years is a long time, even for radioactive materials. But the damage to the containment system is extensive. We would need replacement parts." "Can we fabricate them?" Raxlon asked. "That is the problem," Marcus said, gesturing at the display. "Predecessor metallurgy used materials we do not have. Some elements that do not exist naturally anywhere in the galaxy. They must have synthesized them somehow." He scrolled through more pages of the manual. "But wait, there is a section here about emergency repairs using substitute materials. Let me see what it says." Everyone gathered around as Marcus read the ancient text. His eyes widened as he translated. "This is amazing," he breathed. "The predecessors knew their ships might end up in places where replacement parts were not available, so they designed the systems to accept alternatives. The manual lists equivalent materials that can be used instead of the originals." "And?" Captain Vorn prompted. "And we can make them," Marcus said with growing excitement. "The substitutes are elements we have in our own ships. The performance would not be as good as the original materials, but it would be enough to safely restart the reactor at reduced power." Raxlon's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "How reduced?" "Maybe 60% of maximum output," Marcus calculated. "Enough to power basic flight systems, life support, and computers. Not enough for weapons or faster than light travel, but the ship would be mobile and livable." Captain Vorn considered this carefully. "And you are confident these repairs would be safe?" "I will not risk my crew on a reactor that might fail. The manual includes testing procedures," Marcus assured him. "We follow them step by step. If anything looks wrong, we shut down immediately. The predecessors were very careful about safety." Dr. Kessa's scales brightened with enthusiasm. "Captain, If we could make this ship operational, even partially, it would be the greatest archaeological achievement in galactic history, a flying museum of predecessor technology. It would also be incredibly valuable, one of the security officers pointed out. Every government in the galaxy would want this ship. We could name our price. Marcus frowned. That is not why I am doing this. Then why are you? Captain Vorn asked genuinely. You have spent 15 years translating an ancient manual, sharing your knowledge freely when you could have sold it. You ask for nothing in return. Why? Marcus looked around the glowing chamber, thinking about his answer. When I was a kid, maybe 8 years old, my grandfather took me to a museum on Earth. They had an exhibit about ancient human civilizations. Rome, Egypt, the Maya. All these amazing cultures that built incredible things. He touched the wall, feeling the smooth metal beneath his fingers. My grandfather told me something I never forgot. He said that we honor the past not by hoarding its treasures, but by learning from them and keeping their knowledge alive. The people who built these things wanted their work to mean something, to last, to teach. Marcus turned to face them. The predecessor crew died protecting this ship because they believed it mattered. They left logs and manuals, hoping someone would find them. They wanted their knowledge to survive. The predecessor, they wanted their knowledge to survive. If I keep that knowledge to myself, I am letting them down. But if I share it, if I help bring this ship back to life, then their sacrifice meant something. The chamber hummed softly, almost as if the ship itself approved. Captain Vorn clicked his mandibles in the Krillian gesture of respect. You have wisdom, human. Very well. We will attempt the repairs. But we do this carefully, and by your manual's instructions exactly. Agreed, Marcus said. We will need to gather materials from the Wandering Scholar, mostly standard engineering supplies, but some specific compounds for the reactor repairs. I will have my team prepare everything, Raxlon said. But Marcus, I want to be clear about something. I doubted you when you first arrived. I thought you were just another hopeful treasure hunter. I was wrong. You have my respect and my apology. 3 days passed in careful, methodical work. Marcus led the repair team through the contaminated sections of the ship, following safety protocols from the predecessor manual. The radiation had indeed decayed to safe levels, leaving behind only damaged equipment that could be replaced. Raxlon proved to be an excellent student. The massive Vorkan engineer watched everything Marcus did, asking questions and taking detailed notes. Together, they fabricated replacement components using materials from the research vessel's stores, following the ancient specifications as closely as possible. Dr. Kessa documented everything, creating a complete record of the repair process. She interviewed Marcus extensively about his translation methods, eager to help decode more of the manual. Her archaeological team cataloged every artifact they found, treating the ship like the precious historical treasure it was. On the morning of the 4th day, they gathered in the engineering section where the main reactor sat dormant. The chamber was enormous, built to contain a power source capable of moving a 2-kilometer ship across the galaxy. The reactor itself was a sphere of dark metal suspended in the center by magnetic fields, surrounded by control systems and monitoring equipment. Everything is ready, Raxlon reported, checking his instruments one final time. All replacement parts are installed and tested. Coolant systems are functioning properly. Safety interlocks are in place. Marcus stood at the main control panel with his datapad, the translated manual open to the reactor startup sequence. His hands trembled slightly. This was the moment of truth. According to the manual, the startup takes approximately 30 minutes. He explained to everyone present. The reactor begins at minimum power and gradually increases. If anything goes wrong at any stage, the automatic systems will shut it down immediately. Captain Vorn stood nearby with his security team. And if the automatic systems fail? Then I shut it down manually, Marcus said, patting the emergency control beside him. But honestly, Captain, these safety systems are so well designed. that failure is almost impossible. The predecessors really knew what they were doing. Almost impossible is not the same as impossible, Vorn replied. Everyone except essential personnel, please evacuate to the research vessel. If something goes wrong, I want minimal casualties. Dr. Kessa and most of her team reluctantly left. Only Marcus, Raxlon, Captain Vorn, and 2 engineers remained in the chamber. Okay, Marcus said, taking a deep breath. Here we go. Initiating startup sequence. He pressed a series of symbols on the control panel, following the manual's instructions exactly. The reactor sphere began to glow faintly, a soft blue light emanating from deep within the dark metal. Containment fields activating. Raxlon read from his instruments. Power output rising 0.001% and climbing steadily. The glow intensified. Harmonic tones filled the chamber, the same gentle music they had heard when the ship first awakened. The reactor sang as it came to life. A sound like wind chimes, mixed with distant thunder. 0.01%, Raxlon continued. All readings nominal. Temperature within acceptable range. Coolant flow optimal. Marcus watched his datapad intently, comparing the reactor's behavior to the manual's predictions. Everything matched perfectly. The ancient ship was doing exactly what it was designed to do. 0.1%, Raxlon announced. The rate of increase is accelerating as expected. We should reach stable output in approximately 23 minutes. The reactor's glow spread through the chamber, casting blue light across the walls and ceiling. The magnetic fields holding the sphere created beautiful interference patterns in the air, like aurora lights dancing in an alien sky. This is incredible, one of the engineers whispered. We are watching predecessor technology come back to life. Minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by Raxlon's periodic status updates. The power output climbed steadily. 1%, 2%, 5%. Each milestone brought them closer to success. 10%, Raxlon said, his voice carrying relief. All systems remain stable. At this rate, we will achieve target power in 11 minutes. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. They were going to make it. The ancient ship would fly again. Suddenly, alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the control panels. What is happening? Captain Vorn demanded, reaching for his weapon instinctively. Marcus frantically checked his datapad while Raxlon studied the readings. It is not the reactor, Raxlon reported. Power systems are still stable. The alarm is coming from somewhere else. Navigation section, Marcus said, finding the source. Something triggered the ship's proximity sensors. There is another vessel approaching. Captain Vorna activated his communicator. This is Captain Vorna to Wandering Scholar. Report status immediately. The response came quickly. Captain, we are detecting an unidentified ship entering the asteroid field. They are not responding to our hails. Their weapons systems are active. Pirates, Vorn said grimly. They must have detected the power surge from the reactor. They know the predecessor ship is waking up. How long until they arrive? Marcus asked. 17 minutes, the communications officer reported. Marcus looked at the reactor display. We need 14 more minutes to reach stable power. If we shut down now, we lose everything and have to start over. But if we keep going, we are sitting targets, Raxlon finished. The ship has no shields yet, and we cannot activate weapons without full reactor power. Captain Vorn made a decision. Continue the startup. Everyone except Mr. Webb and Chief Engineer Raxlon, evacuate immediately. Wandering Scholar, prepare for defensive action. We protect this ship until the reactor is stable. Captain, the research vessel is not a warship, the communications officer protested. We cannot fight pirates. We do not need to fight them, Vorn replied. The unnecessary personnel evacuated quickly. Marcus stayed at the controls, monitoring the reactor's progress while trying not to think about the approaching threat. Raxlon worked beside him, his forearms moving rapidly across multiple control panels. 15%, Raxlon announced. 12 minutes to target power. Through the ship's external sensors, they watched the pirate vessel approach. It was a heavily armed cruiser, bristling with weapons and scarred from many battles. It moved through the asteroids with practiced ease, heading straight for them. 10 minutes, Marcus said quietly. We just need 10 more minutes. The wandering scholar positioned itself between the predecessor ship and the approaching pirates. It was a brave gesture, but ultimately futile. The research vessel had minimal weapons and shields designed for navigation hazards, not combat. 20% power, Raxlon reported. 9 minutes remaining. The pirate ship opened fire.